If you forgot how to open up Zoom, it's under ETSU E3, DIGM classes, Greg, and it's this right here, Zoom meeting. That'll open it up in another window for you. We're going to be going through some stuff pretty quickly today, so it would probably be pretty handy to have that open. Slow me down if you miss something, because it's way easier to answer a question right after I said it than when I'm 5 steps beyond, right? So everybody at this point, before we jump in there, everybody at this point should have all of your character animations exported. So you'll have your skeletal mesh, and you should have 6 animations for that skeletal mesh. The idle, the run, the jump up, the jump loop, and the jump down. And so we'll be doing something with that in a minute, but if you forgot to export one of those or whatever, maybe be doing that while we're finishing up this part of the conversation. So really, I just wanted to touch base and mention something. We have somebody coming here next week you may have seen some flyers hung up about it. I was a little late getting those up. His name's Anthony, and he's coming from a company called ID Tech. Has anybody here worked with ID Tech before?
I always get ID Tech mixed up with id Software.
Completely different things, but yeah, I can see that. So ID Tech is a summer camp program for middle school and high school kids, and it's they're always looking for camp counselors for that. There's no camping involved. It's actually all inside of a building with refreshments and etc. And it pays pretty well for a summer job. The cool thing about it is there are camps all over the country for this, so they have tons of different locations. I want to say it's like 150 locations or something, but don't quote me on that. They got Raleigh, they got Atlanta, they got Nashville, they got Philadelphia, I think Pittsburgh. Lots of different places where you can go work on those camps, and they really like our students. Like the people who hire from there hire from this department pretty heavily. I think one semester there was like 17 of our students went to work in these camps. For these camps. That's something terrible. So this is something if you're interested in doing, Anthony is going to be here Monday recruiting for that, like looking for people trying to get you to let him give you a job. He'll be downstairs in the lobby and sort of out there where the chairs are, where the TV is. Stop by and chat with him. It's a pretty good opportunity, and I think one of the things that is kind of a neat takeaway from it is that you can go to a different city and sort of test drive that city for a little bit. Like maybe you're considering, would I like living in Pittsburgh? Well, go try it out and discover that you would not. Like, I don't know, Pittsburgh is already. Or discover that you would. I don't know.
Pittsburgh is a great city.
Is it?
Yeah. It's definitely up there in my top cities.
But that's where like those Steelers are from.
What's wrong with the Steelers?
I'm just saying.
What's a good
Pittsburgh. I'm just picking.
Sports ball.
I lived in Baltimore. They were like mortal enemies. Pittsburgh and Baltimore. So actually, it was weird because I worked with a lot of people who were from Pittsburgh, and it's like they all moved to Baltimore, but we're still like yeah. So it was weird. Anyway, find a city you want to go to. Have them send you there so you can work there. I can't remember what the pay rate is, but it's pretty decent for a summer job. If you have more questions about it, I can kind of put you in touch with some people who have done it before. Anybody know? You all know Laura Osteen? Yep. She serves as like a lead there for. I want to say she does the one in Pennsylvania somewhere. I don't remember which one. But she can answer a lot of questions about what it is. But each location has different things that they teach. A lot of it's game design, animation, art, coding. Sometimes it's making stuff in like the source filmmaker or something like that. So it's a pretty cool opportunity if you're interested in doing that. So we'll miss that one. Okay. So let's look at where we are right now. On my computer, last class, on the last episode, I was working in this, wait, where did I put it? Greg in class, there it is. And I had this Liger rig that I had animated. And as you'll remember, let's see if these actually open up in anything. What? Oh, apparently this was like, Windows has a 3D viewer. Okay, I didn't animate a bee. What are you doing? Okay, so if this isn't working, how we fix this, again, File Explorer. Actually, I may already have this one open. And we can install the character animation, resources. We can install that FBX review software if you want to just be able to double click and look at them. So I'll go ahead and install this really quick just in case I need it. FBX review. Always use this app to open files. And there we go. So there's our character, right? So you should have that same list. You have skeletal mesh. You should have 6 animations. And what we're going to do today is we're going to create an Unreal project. We're going to get those characters into Unreal, operating as your player character, triggering the animations you created. We're going to create some animation or create some additional functionality to that. So there's a lot of steps involved in this. Like usually after the freshman level class, I don't teach like step-by-step processes as much. I teach theory and let you fight with it because I feel like that's one of the better ways to learn. This is one of those things that if I just let you fight with it, you'll eventually end up like laying on the floor crying. Like it's not a you can figure it out sort of thing.
That's how it usually goes when I fight people, yeah.
Well, we're not going to let you fight with it. I'm going to help you through it. And I'm recording it so you can always go back and watch it whenever you want to. So we talked about where Unreal lives, right? Which is, if you need a reminder, we go to the file folder, this PC, and it's on our C drive. Right? And then if we're not going to use the most up-to-date version, it's under Program Files, so not Program Files 86, but just Program Files. And then Epic Games. And then you should see 2 different game engines there, 4.23 and mine is 4.24. Yours may not have 4.24 on it. It really doesn't matter. You just need to remember that number, right? Because if you have 4.23 and you open this up, you can not open it up on 4.22 later, right? You can only go up. So that means when you go home and if you're wanting to download Unreal, you'll have to download the version that you are using here, or you'll have to download it to your hard drive so you can install it anywhere you go. Right? So I'm going to go ahead and do 4.23 just because. So if I click 4.23, I go to, and you know what? No, I'm not. We got 4.24 on here. I'm going to go ahead and use 4.24 just because I know it'll try to auto launch it if I double click it on that anyway. We go to Engine after we go into this folder. Binaries. We're using Windows 64 and we're making a game for Windows 64, so we'll choose that one. And then what we're looking for is UE, I think it's UE editor. Yeah, there's this UE editor, it's up here, right there, right? The easier way to find that is to sort this by type, and you'll see UE editor at the top right there. So go ahead and double click that. Okay. what are you doing? This is different. Huh.
What the heck?
Are you using 4.24?
Really? They changed this on, I think so. I think they changed this on 4.24. Okay, well now we know. So this is interesting and actually brings up a lot of what we were talking about. It asks you what kind of project you're making, right? And you feel like the answer should be pretty obvious. You're making a game. You're in Unreal, right? Unreal is used for a lot of stuff now, right? Film, television, live events, architectural and engineering. Unreal is used by Walmart to design their stores. Because if you think about it, that feels like a really bad game, doesn't it? Like going into a Walmart. That's why you have to walk through so many expensive things to get to the milk, right? Because they realize that they can build virtual stores, figure out the way that you can walk through a Walmart and spend the maximum amount of money, or at least be tempted to spend the maximum amount of money, right? In case you needed another reason to hate Walmart. But other things that it's used for, right, is let's say you're trying to get a client to move to your city, right? You're a realtor, and you're like, we have this really great space. It could be beautiful. Like we could make it all these trees everywhere and this really awesome living space and workspace. Okay. And one of the ways you can sell that to them is to just make it virtually and let someone walk through it, right? You could literally do a VR version of what this space could look like. Realtors are doing that quite a bit. There's a lot of different things that's happening on this. So I think this is an interesting indicator. This won't show up if you're using 4.23. You'll get probably what's the next screen. But let's say we're making, in this case, we're going to go ahead and make a game. So let's click Games, Next, and we land on this screen. So we talked about this earlier, right? We can make a side scroller, a 2D side scroller, or a third-person game. If you're using Unreal for a 2D side scroller, that's the only one that I can't support as much. I've looked into it. I think I understand how to do it, but I don't want you I don't want you leaning completely on that. You are probably going to have to do some research into Paper 2D, if you, which is Unreal's like 2D animation implementation software, if you're wanting to do the 2D side scroller in here. If you're doing it in Construct, today's lesson is going to be very boring to you because it really doesn't apply in a lot of ways. But I think it's still important to know this part, so we're going to go ahead and hop in here anyway. What I'm going to make, though, is a third-person game. Now, I would say, like, 3D side scroller and this third-person game, for the most part, are the exact same thing. It's just how the camera is locked. So a 2D side scroller actually works pretty well too. If you want to do that, it actually also gives you a better angle on your character if what you're wanting to show is like a profile of some of these animations, right? When we make a 3D platformer, most of the time we're looking at the back of the character, and the animations aren't always as appealing from that angle. So for your demo reel, you maybe want to capture it from a different angle. Right? You'll capture it from like your character running toward the camera or sort of at an angle from the camera, right? So either one is fine. I'm still going to do third person because it's a little easier to understand. So, not first person though, because then you won't be able to see your character. That's kind of the point. Third person, next. They've changed this a lot. They have real-time ray tracing now. Okay, so this is kind of one of the important screens here. You want to create a blueprint or a C++ project. In this case, we're going to go ahead and create a blueprint project just because blueprint is the visual coding language that you use in Unreal that'll allow you to kind of solve some of these problems without having to know any code. It's still not easy. There's still some figuring it out to do. But it's a lot easier than having to learn all the syntax for C++ just to get your character to run inside of a game engine. So we're going to go ahead and use Blueprint. Here's the important part. Where are we going to put this? Right? So I'm going to put mine in the same place I was putting my animations, which was this folder right here, Greg in class, right next to my Maya file. So I can choose that path, Control C. And then I'll call this in class game. So I would suggest that you put this either on your student drive or a portable hard drive or something like that, so you are able to find that easily later. If you just put this somewhere in your documents or put it on the D drive, who knows? Like if you put it on the D drive, you have to set it that same computer every time you work on it. Okay, we're ready to go. Create project. So, all that digging we had to do to find Unreal and that, binaries, Win64, all that stuff. Once we've launched this, we can actually open this up anytime we want to. I'll go ahead and close it just so you can see. By going to this in-class game folder that it's now created, and you'll see it's right there, in-class game. So if I double click on that, there it goes. All right. So really what that's doing is it's opening the file and the editor, because that's the only thing that'll open up an Unreal level, right? Or an Unreal project. Now, how many of you have never used Unreal before? Interesting. Oh. I'm talking to you all. So, if you haven't, or even if you have, take a minute. We're going to kind of get familiar with Unreal. Hit the play button here, and you'll see that you're able to start playing the game. WASD will let your character run. Space will let your character jump. And really, that's all we got, right? You can run around on different platforms. It's a pretty boring game so far. When you're navigating around in a scene, there's a couple of different ways you can get around. One is sort of the same way you would get around in a game, the WASD keys and then moving your mouse. So you'll recognize if you just click your regular left click and move around, your camera just sort of slides around wherever you're pointing it. If you use right click, you can angle it. And then WASD will move you around in it as if you were in some sort of flying game, right? But this will also work in Maya's shortcut keys, right? If you hold down Alt and regular click, you can tumble around in here and move around in here just like in Maya. Okay.
Wait, did you say WASD will let you fly around when you're not in the play mode?
Mm-hmm.
Because mine aren't doing anything.
Click inside the window.
I did. All it's doing is selecting the...
Oh, I'm sorry. You're right. You have to have the left click push down while you're doing that. Basically, that's the activating the... So if you click... any of the buttons you have clicked down, and then you can use WASD.
Mine's moving the camera. If I have it, I don't know what it's. Oh, no, there it goes. I just looked at the right.
Yeah, so that's when you hit the play button, you're in like gameplay mode, like you're playing the game. So if at any point you're playing the game and you want to stop, what button do you hit to get out? Escape. Mm-hmm. So, all right. So I want to look at a couple more things here before we start bringing our characters in. First, we got our content browser down here at the bottom. This is everything that is in our Unreal game that we need to edit. If you click all the way over here next to filters, there's this little play button with these lines. That'll expand it out, and you'll be able to see the different folders a little more clearly. You can also use these little breadcrumbs at the top up here if you get too deep into one of them. Now, what I think it's important to notice is that these are all actual files that are somewhere on your computer. If you go in here to our in-game or in-class game and you double-click on content, you'll see there's all of those same folders, right? So as we're creating things, we're actually creating files within this folder structure, right? So so let's go ahead and look at some of the things that already exist in here, though. When we first created this, it asked, do we want to use starter content? It was checked on by default when we were choosing which folder to put this in. So we have this starter content information in here. And if you can expand that, you'll see that there's stuff like, find one here, architecture. So there's like this wall with a window in it, right? Or there's also props. So that's like this door or this bench, right? You can move these around in the scene with W, E, and R, just like in Maya. W is translate, E is rotate. And you'll see that they kind of snap to a grid, so I can position these wherever.
You can change how much it snaps by.
Yeah, so you can change the snapping increments. Right now it's snapping every 10 degrees. And moving every 10 units. Okay, so I think it's worth thinking about right now what Maya considers an object in here, or how Maya looks at these objects, right? If it's a model, it's going to be in one of two categories, right? There's a static mesh and a skeletal mesh. A static mesh doesn't move, hence the name, static mesh, right? I mean, it can move. It's not going to deform though, right? That's going to be for stuff like chairs and rocks and tables. Pretty much anything that is not a deformable object, like a being of some sort. The other type is a skeletal mesh, which is a model with a skeleton in it that can move, right? And in this case, the only skeletal mesh we have in this scene is this dude. Right? His title, whatever his name is the mannequin. So if we look over here, we'll see mannequin in our content. And if I double click on character, you'll see we have this mesh of the mannequin, this SK mannequin. And if I double click on that, it'll open him up in a window. There he is, right? If I hold Alt in this window, I can tumble around him. So he's a mesh. He has a skeleton. You can see like all the parts of his skeleton in here. If I show this, let's put, I'm going to go ahead and show all hierarchy. So you can see the skeleton in there that's used to drive him, right? And that skeleton is deforming certain parts of his mesh, right? The skeleton is weighted to vertices and moving that around. So he also has animations. And animations are just movements that are on that skeleton, right? That's what we baked out when we were exporting out our character. So if I go, let me turn this off here, character bones. If I go ahead and close this, you'll see that within this mannequin folder, we have this animations folder, right? And there's several animations in here. There's actually a couple more than the ones we made. We have a jump, an idle, and then he has the 3 jumps broken up into pieces the way we do. Actually, the first one is just third-person jump. It's really just the same thing as jump start in here. We have a run, and then this character also has a walk, right? In case you wanted to be able to trigger the run by holding shift or something like that. If I double click on one of those, it's going to open up that same window we just had. Let's play the run, right? Except now you'll see we're over here in this animation tab. I can still go back to mesh if I want to see the model, but I'm over here in animation. I can see the character running. I can use these buttons over here, or these this list over here in my asset browser to change which animation I'm looking at. So I can go just to my walk, double click on it. So that's how he walks. And this is pretty cool because we can use this to sort of analyze what's going on in our character, right? This is the idle. You can see that it kind of does a perfect loop. We can also see the start jump, which is him like this jumping off the ground, right? The loop in the middle where he's floating in the air. And then the jump end, which is where he hits the ground. Okay. So the way to think of this, there's a skeletal mesh, and that skeletal mesh has multiple animations that are applied to it. When I double click on this, all it's doing is playing the animation on that skeleton, right? And so I could import in more animations onto this skeleton if I wanted to. However, our character has a different skeleton, right? Some of yours has like hair. Some of yours has like other elements, other proportions. And so what we're going to do is we're going to bring in an entirely new skeletal mesh. And then we're going to bring in our animation set and apply those to that skeletal mesh. Okay? So let's look at how we do that. First, I'm going to create a new folder under content. I'm going to right click, new folder, Liger, Liger. So this is where I'm going to keep most of my stuff. So to import something, there's this import button right here, or I can right click in this area and say import to game Liger. And I'm just going to go look in that FBX folder where I was exporting my FBX yesterday. So that's Greg in class, Liger rig, export. So again, we have 7 files here. When we were exporting out of Maya, remember we, actually let me go ahead and get Maya open so we can talk about that.
Wait, can you go through that process one more time when creating a folder?
Oh, sure. Just in content, right click, new folder. And then
What did you do next to pull it in after you import?
I haven't yet.
Oh, okay.
But after I go into that folder, you can right click and choose import. So I went ahead and canceled that because I was going to show you some stuff on that really quick. File. Give it a second. Okay, so when I go to my game exporter, if I was exporting from the animation tab, that's where I got my 6 animation files, the one that say Liger run or Liger attack, right? If I go to the model file, that's what exported out my skeletal mesh, right? And the skeletal mesh, again, is the joints, or the skeleton, the mesh, and then the skinning data that allows the mesh to move the right way. The animation clip has all of that stuff on it as well, but it also has animation data. Right? And so what I'm going to do is import in the model file, and then I'm going to import in just the animation from those other files and apply them to the model in Unreal. Why isn't this still propagated out? Is that my, making sure I didn't, no, that works. All my folders have changed though. So, right click, import to game Liger. I'm going to go ahead and go to my PC, D, find those folders, right? Greg and class, Liger rig, export. And I'm just going to choose the one Liger or whatever yours is named, right? Just the model file. And I'll hit open. Now, this brings us to this screen. As it is right now, I think that everything here is just set to the way we want it, right? If it's not for some reason, hit this reset to default. And then we should just be able to say import all. Now, I clicked on one file. Watch what all comes in when it finishes importing. We'll take it a minute. Okay. So I got some errors, but that's okay. I'll go ahead and close that. So I imported one file and I got that. It was like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 files, right? It's bringing in a node for every element that I'm going to need in this. So I brought in the Liger, which is the skeletal mesh. When it brought it in, it separated the skeleton into this Liger skeleton file. Right, you can see that right here. For each of the materials, it created this material node, these little spheres, right? And if we double click on those spheres, you'll see there's some materials hooked up to it, right? In this case, there's something hooked up to the opacity and to the base color, right? So, so that's what these are. These are these texture maps. Right? The result of all of that, plus this one last thing, this physics asset, right, is our skeletal mesh, or is our character as we see it. Right? That physics asset means that if we're simulating physics in any way, it can interact with that, which we're going to need when we have our character punching stuff, right? Or kicking or whatever attack we do with it. So, one last thing I want you to notice on this, on each of those, there's a little bitty star in the bottom corner. See that? That means that file has not been saved. Any changes we made to it have not been saved yet. So I want to save all of those. I can highlight all of that, holding shift, right click, and save. Or I could go to File, Save All, and that will save anything that I've made changes to. Right? Sometimes you want to make changes and not keep them, so that's why you don't always do Save All. You can just select individuals. Okay, so we have our Liger. What we don't have is any animations on it. If I double click on it right now, open it up, we get this. Looks pretty good in terms of materials and everything. Right? But you'll notice that all I have is skeletal mesh, or skeleton, mesh, and physics. Right? There's no animation list. So that means we're going to bring in the animations separately. I'm going to go ahead and put those in a different folder. So within my Liger rig, folder, anim, stupid caps lock. I really, oh. Oh, okay, you're deleting that. Oh, there we go. I'm going to go into the anim folder. I'm going to right click and go to import again. I'm going to highlight all of these, but this is going to get a little bit different. Everything except for the skeletal mesh I'm going to highlight, so all of the animation files. And I'm going to say open. But I'm not going to say import yet, because there's some things I have to change. If I said import right now, what it would do is import in a mesh, a skeleton, a physics object, an animation, and all of the textures for each of those animations. Right? We would end up with like 30 files. I just need 6. I need just the animation clips. I already have the model and all of the textures and all of that. Right? So what that means is I need to go up here and uncheck skeleton or import mesh. right here, right underneath skeletal mesh. Uncheck that. Because I don't need that. I just need to apply it to an existing skeleton already. So I got the skeleton here. I can drop that down. And the skeleton I want to apply it to is the Liger skeleton. Now I think this is interesting to consider. If I have the same rig for multiple characters, I could do a run and I could apply that animation to multiple characters. I could use the same run on 5 different characters, right? So we're going to use the existing skeleton, the one we just imported in right now. Hit that, and I'll say import all. This will take a few minutes. See, I'm using Unreal.
I like it.
I know.
Hey, this is Alex P. that I can't pronounce his last name or spell it.
Hi, Alex P.
Hello.
Okay.
I emailed you about him.
Yeah.
What?
We'll chat about that in a bit.
Okay. I said you were a bad human being.
Yeah.
That makes sense, but
Wow, you executed
it's
that
weird
just
getting
better than I did.
Okay, so now we have the animations in here. So if I double click on Liger Run, look at that animation.
Can you go over
Todd's gonna think I can't animate, y'all. Do what?
Can you go over that bit again where you put them in there?
Huh?
The bit where you put them in, yeah.
Yep. So let me actually just delete them all out of here. Right click,
Okay.
delete, force delete. So again, right click, import. I'm going to choose all the animations, so not the skeletal mesh, just the animations. Hit open. And then once we get to this, again, if I hit import all right now, I get like 30 files. I uncheck import mesh, and I'm going to apply it to the Liger skeleton. Oh, one more thing. It automatically turns on animation when I do that. Like before I unchecked mesh, there was a button in there that said import animation. That's automatically checked on now. So
I just need to uncheck import mesh and set the skeleton to my skeleton.
uh-huh.
That's what I need to do in that folder. Uncheck import mesh, set the skeleton to my skeleton.
Mm-hmm.
Really? Sorry, thank you.
Okay.
And then click import all?
Import all. Here it comes. Okay. Okay. There we go. Now, I'll go ahead and save those. What that means now is all of my animations should be here on this list now, and I can play them. That I'm a masterful animator. I'll just leave that one there for a little while, but let him play. All right. So we've imported in our character. It's applied the animations to the skeletal mesh. The hope is now I could just hit play and it would work, right?
no.
Anybody want to guess if that's what happens or not when I hit play? Mm-hmm. If I hit play, I'm still playing as this guy. In fact, my character is nowhere to be seen. Right? Maybe I just need to drag my character in here.
Oh no.
Maybe I of course I want my character to run around. So, ooh, he's big. Oh, I should have checked his size. Mhm.
Yeah, the skeleton one that I have is real small. He's like half the size. He's got everything under.
That's the one thing I didn't check when I was checking to see if these imported in, is what scale they were. It's all right, we can change that, but it kind of sucks. But so I've got him in there now. If I hit play, watch him go, but I'm still playing as this guy, right? Now I kind of want to be that Liger character. I mean, not like in real life or anything, but
In real life.
in real life,
Think about the things you can do.
yeah. All the things. If I was a giant
Think about what you're right.
hybrid cat. Okay. So Maya recognizes that we have a skeletal mesh that can move now, but not Maya, Unreal. What it doesn't recognize is that that's a character, right? Maybe I just imported some sort of octopus that's like hanging out on a boat. Maybe I just it doesn't know what I want to do with this, right? It's just a moving creature. It could be an NPC, could be a bird flying through the air, right? I'm needing to tell it I want it to be my player character, right? So let's talk about this just a little bit. When I hit play, right, you'll see that. Let me go ahead and get rid of this guy. He's distracting. When I hit play, right, there's this little capsule that's around my character. You see that? Kind of a pill shape. It's kind of hard to see in there, but you can probably see it on yours. And then back behind it, there's a camera. All of that is one unit, right? And when I hit play, what's happening is that capsule is moving around. And as it moves around, depending on what input I'm giving it, it's playing a specific animation. My character isn't really running across the ground. That capsule is sliding across the ground and is playing the running animation while my character sort of rides along on that capsule, right? So really what I'm needing to do is replace the character within that capsule. And that's not actually very hard to do. What's hard to do is to make Unreal understand that when I hit the W key, I want that to play my character's run cycle. And when I hit the space bar, I want that to make my character jump. Now, fortunately, somebody's already solved all of that for this mannequin character. And like a good game designer, I'm just going to steal it and use it again and change it for my own needs. One of my friends is a programmer at Firaxis, and he was there for like 18 years. It was like 16 years, 18 years, or something like that. And that's what he posted. Is like, someday they're just going to figure out that I'm just stealing code from the internet. But I mean, it's not like this has never been solved before, right? Somebody solved it. We can take some of those solutions and apply them to our character. Now, in this case, the reason we're going to do that in this class is because this is a character animation class, right? In most situations, the animator is not the one who's building the functionality for your character anyway. A really small team, maybe. In most cases, there'll be a programmer who does most of that support, or a designer who is one of the people who's hanging out in this class usually during the from the previous class, right? If you know how to do a little bit of that gives you an upper hand, because that means you can take some of that load off of the programmer who's trying to do something much more complicated, and that way you can have you can have some input on how that works in the game too. So let's go ahead and start this process of stealing the assets we need. Let's look at where they're located first. So the first one is going to be in this third-person BP down here at the bottom. If I click on the blueprints folder, you'll see this third-person character. So a blueprint, I want to open that up. This is an example of a blueprint, right? It's a bunch of these nodes that you can kind of wire together to get a functionality. It's a type of visual programming or visual scripting, right? Lots of stuff is moving toward this. Unity, I think GameMaker has a visual coding. Lots of 2D engines do. And really all it is like little blocks of code that are executing. You're just able to see it more visually. So if you're not familiar with coding syntax, then you don't have to, you don't have to learn all of that to still be able to accomplish something. In all honesty, if you want some of the history of this, Unity started implementing this way before Unreal did, and started stealing a lot of the client base. And so that's why Unreal, I think, implemented Blueprint, is because people want to be able to pick up a game engine and get something functioning pretty quickly without having to go through like 30 hours of programming or C++ tutorials to get Hello World to work, right? So we got a pretty simple to learn process, but still has a lot of functionality. So when I opened up this, a couple of the things you'll see in this, right click, I can move around. This is our event graph for the third person character game, right? Functionality, right? The way that third person character is working, which is I hit the W, the ASD key, and that drives my character around the scene. You'll also see something in here, gamepad input. That means if I were to plug up a controller to this, it would recognize that and it would still function correctly. And so that's what this is all the coding that is making that happen, or all the scripting that's making that happen. The construction script, just kind of ignore that for right now. We're not going to be doing very much with that. And then the final little tab over here is this viewport tab. And if we click on that, we'll see our character. Look at him there. He's a happy little guy. So one of the things we're going to do, but we're going to wait till last to do it, or close to last in this process, we're going to come in here and we're going to select him and we're going to swap out our character for him, right? I'm also going to scale my character down. But you'll see that where it says Mesh Inherited right here, it's currently looking at the SK mannequin, and I can just swap that out for my Liger. I still want to kind of hold off on that for right now, and we'll do that closer to the end of the process, just because there's some other stuff we need to do in here. So the other blueprint we're going to look at is up here in the mannequin, right? Under character, under animations, you'll see third person anim BP. So this is the blueprint that makes the animations trigger correctly, okay? So when I hit the up button, or the W key, right, I want that little capsule to move around the screen, but I also want it to play the run animation, right? This is where all that functionality is going to take place. This is also the thing we are going to steal, right? So third person anim BP, double click on that. The first thing you'll get in here is like this is just like, I don't know, I just think this is funny. Is in the air? Not. Can't enter transition. Yeah, not. You just put a lot of not all over everything. So this is just one step of the animation that's happening. You'll see these little breadcrumbs across the top. If I step back through here, you'll see I go to default. This is the animation state machine, right? This is saying at which point your animations will transition, or in the way that your animations will transition from one to the other, right? And so what you see is we have this first one, idle run. Right? That means that something is going to control whether our character is either idling, like standing in place, sort of playing that idle animation, or running. What do you think controls that?
What program are you in?
Is
Is this animation class?
Is this raster-based imaging? I thought I was using Photoshop.
Idle or running? What is the determining factor if your character is playing the idle animation or your character is playing the running animation?
If they're in motion, or are they moving?
They're in motion, right? So we could also say speed, right? Your character's speed. If the speed is 0, play the idle animation. If our speed is anything higher than 0, we can start playing the run animation, right? So this is one of the things we have from that. But if I tap the space bar, it's going to play the jump animation. And so we got a little transition in here between whether you're in idle or run into playing that jump animation. And so what this allows us to do is sort of blend in and out of animations so they're not popping or triggering too fast or too abruptly. So we're going to steal all of this, because why make all this from scratch when we got a perfectly good one right here, right? This is animation ethics. Okay. All of that lives, if I go back to this anim graph state here, it all lives in this default state machine, right? And so select that, Control C. That's all the coding I'm going to teach you. Actually, did y'all hear, I think it was yesterday, the programmer who invented Control C and Control V for copy and paste died. Yeah.
Oh, I thought you were going to say something like he regretted his...
He regretted it. He's like, all those kids should write in cursive and they should have to type everything.
He was one of the, there were 2 people who worked on it, and he was one of them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Was he Control C or was he Control V?
Well, now he's Control X. I'm sorry, that was really dark. Sorry.
Okay, so we copied it, Control C for programmers, close that down. So now we need our own version of that over in our character, right? So we go to the Liger. I'm just going to put it here in this root folder. So we're going to create, because we don't currently have an animation blueprint for our character, right? So we're going to create a new one, and it's going to be attached to that character. So that's one of the reasons we're creating a new one, is because if I just copied that entire animation blueprint and moved it here, it would still be looking at the mannequin character. It would still be trying to apply that to the mannequin character. So I'm going to right-click here, animation blueprint, right there. Now, when I click that, you'll see it says, what do I want to apply this to? There's two target skeletons. I want to apply it to our skeleton, the Liger skeleton. Select that, hit OK, and I'll go ahead and rename this Liger Anim Blueprint. There we go. So if I double click on this, you'll see there's that. Remember that thing that our animation blueprint was, or our state machine was plugged into? So I can just hit Control V and paste our state machine in there and plug that in. Right? How many of you think this is going to work?
Yeah.
So if I hit compile, so we need, we're changing stuff in the scripting, so we have to compile this before we do it. Compile and save. If I hit compile, oh, look at that, a bunch of red stuff popped up. That means it didn't work, right?
You don't say.
And that's okay, right? Because this is actually just our to-do list now. This is the things we have to change, right? Now we know how to do this.
Stealing that. Stealing that.
So there's something else that's in our blueprint here that you may have noticed, which is there's the anim graph. There's also this event graph, right? And right now we just have these two nodes. Basically, both of those nodes are saying this refers to the Liger character, right? The stuff that we're going to be doing is referring to that. If we go back and look at our, let's save that. We'll go back and look at our mannequin blueprint. You'll see that the event graph in that has a lot going on. So we could learn how to use blueprint, or Control C. This is for you, buddy. Like whoever that guy was, I can't remember his name. Anyway, Liger.
Hold on, where'd you copy it from?
Okay, let me go back. Mannequin, animation blueprint. So it's all of the stuff that wasn't in ours, right? So it's under the event graph in the third person anim blueprint. So these are the two nodes that are referring to the mannequin. I don't really need those. I mean, I can take them with me if I wanted to, right? But what I'm going to do is just grab everything else, right? And then Control C on that. So now if I go back to my Liger character, where's my blueprint? There it is, anim blueprint. So I'm just going to paste them into here. I'm actually going to scoot it over here a little bit. Control V. So there's all of that, right? So really now all I have to do is plug these two that refer to my character back into this. Okay? So this top one, you'll see this little like baseball mound like shape. That's going to go into this execute for is valid. So I just click on that, drag a line out from it, plug it in. This try get pawn owner, we have a return value on that. I'm just going to plug it into every blue dot that is not currently plugged in this. So we'll plug it into is valid. We'll also plug it into this get movement component. And we'll also plug it into this setting speed. There we go. So you would think that I fixed some of these by now, right? If I hit compile, nope, I just made some more. So, yeah. But believe it or not, we're making progress, right? Because all of these are going to start to resolve pretty quickly. So this is how I like to do it, just because I have a template now that I can kind of just change. Right? These are all like going to function now. I just have to change them. So let's go ahead and save this. There's still one more file I need to create before I can start to fix some of these things. You know what? I'm not going to create that yet. We'll create it here in a minute. So I want you to notice these first 2 or 3 errors, right? It says, could not find variable is in error question mark. Okay? So if we were to go back and look at the mannequin, there's a variable in there that says, is this character in the air? Okay? A variable just means it's a number that can change. Right? The answer could be yes. The answer could be no. It depends on the situation. Right? So let's go ahead and create a new variable for that. So variables right here. If you go out here underneath the image, we go down to variables and click this little plus sign. It's going to create a new variable, and I'll just type in capital I, S, capital I, N, capital A, I, R, question mark. So it needs to be written like that, because that's how it's referring to it in all of the code, right? Is in error, right? And what this is going to do is it's going to check and see, is the character in the error or not, right? This variable is. Or actually the code is, this is sort of what's referring to it. So you'll see now if I hit compile, it fixed one of my errors, 1. All right, so we're checking them off the list. Now, if I look at that variable, is in the air, you'll see it's got that little red box by it. Right? And you'll notice over here in our details, that red box means it's a Boolean. What are the possible answers to that question?
Yes and no.
Yes and no, right? Are you in the air? Well, kinda. Like, that doesn't make sense, right? You're either in the air or you're not in the air. You're on the ground. So that's a Boolean operation. It's a 1 or a 0. It's a yes or a no. So the other little thing here that it's saying it's missing is speed, right? So it's a variable for speed. So let's create another variable here and call it SPEED, capital S, right? Okay, so let's say you got a ticket on the way to class because you were speeding, and you were telling me about that, and I was like, oh, well, what was the speed you were going? How fast were you going? And you said, no. Right? That answer doesn't make sense, right? Speed's answer can be a number that changes. Right? In fact, in this case, it could be I guess it could be a negative number. But it could be you were going 1.2, or you were going 500, or you were going. You wouldn't answer with a fraction, right? You wouldn't answer 1/4. I was going 1/4 because 1/4 refers to some other thing, right? So speed is a float variable. So if I select the speed node here and go over here to variable type, I'm going to click the little drop-down box and choose float instead, right? So there's a lot of different things that we could have in here as different types of variables. Float is the one that we're going to choose for right now. Change variable type, do it. Okay, good job. So now if I hit compile, look at that, I fixed a lot of stuff. We're getting closer. Okay, so this is looking good, but all of these little things that we're seeing here now, those are all referring back to our anim graph. Right? So this is our event graph. Our anim graph is that state machine, right? If I step back over here to the state machine, we got this default state machine, and I double click on that. So I copied them all over here, and I put them into this statement, or into this blueprint that is referring to our Liger character, but all of these things are referring to animations that are on the mannequin character, right? So when it says pull this UE mannequin skeleton or pull this third person jump start asset, right, it doesn't know where that is, and even if it did, it couldn't apply it to this character, right? So basically what we're going to have to do is go through and sort of go in a circle around this and change all of the elements that need to be changed. but the first one doesn't exist yet. So this idle run, that's referring to what is called a blend state, right? So think of it this way. Your character is idling, right? And then you hit the W character to make, or the W key to make it run. Like, you don't want it to just turn on that animation. Like, suddenly your character would just pop into a run and be running, right? You want it to kind of blend into that. And in fact, there's a lot of times where maybe you would want it to sort of start accelerating up to a walk and then get to a run, right? There's sort of transitions that you could blend between in order to make that feel more realistic. So we need that to happen, but these little nodes you're seeing here are usually referring to whole animations. So what I'm going to do is go ahead and close this for right now, and I'm going to go to my, let's go ahead and go to my anim folder, and I'm going to right click in here, and I'm going to go to animation, and I'm going to create a blend space. I'm going to do a 1D blend space, right? One dimensional. So that means it's like a straight line. I'm blending either between idle and run, right? Recognize that there's a lot of uses for this. You could have a blend space that is in multiple dimensions, meaning like maybe your character is looking left, or maybe they're looking up, or a combination of the two, right? And so you can blend in between those different poses. So what I'm going to use is blend space 1D right here. I'm going to create it. I'm going to tell it I want to use it on the Liger skeleton, and I'll just go ahead and name that Liger, Liger blend space. Now, we have that made, but we don't have anything plugged into it yet. So if I double click on that Liger blend space 1D, I get this. It's this big black space in the middle here, right? And you'll notice if I drag my mouse along there, well, you have to have something in there first. If I drag one of these files in there, it will allow me to place it somewhere on this spectrum of left to right. So I'm going to grab my idle first. And I'm going to drag that, and you'll see it starts to snap to different locations. Right? And you'll notice that number along the bottom there. It goes from 0 to 100. Right? So I'm going to drag it all the way over here to 0. Meaning if my character is not moving at all, play the idle animation. Right? If my character is moving at top speed, I want it to play the run animation. So I'll drag that over to the 100 side of it. Right? Now you'll see it's still playing my idle animation, but if I grab this little green thing, I can preview in between that. Right? I can start here with my idle and slowly move up to where it's partially playing the run and partially playing the idle. Right? Until I'm completely idle and no run. Right? It's going to use that spectrum to blend into our animation as our character's speed increases. Right? So once we get to the top speed, it will set this to run. When our speed is 0, it'll set it to idle. Right? Okay. Right click, save. So let's go back to our blueprint now for our Liger. So, Liger anim blueprint. If I compile, fix anything? Nothing. Okay. This will start to fix itself pretty quickly from here, right? Because really what's happening now is we have everything we need. We just have to look at what's in there and then go replace it with the actual correct file. So this first one is a good example of that. If I double click on idle run, you'll see that there are two things in here. There's the speed, and then there's that blend space that, that the mannequin had, right? Well, I have my own speed, and I have my own blend space. So if I click over here on where it says Animation Preview Editor, if I go to Asset Browser, you'll see there's my animation assets. So I can drag speed in here. It's going to ask me which type of speed. Do I want to get the speed of the variable that is in the variable, or do I want to set the speed in the variable? So that means, like, is this action checking to see what the character's speed is, or is it determining or changing what the character's speed is, like making it go faster? We want to get the speed, right? We want to see what the speed is, because if the speed is 0, it will play idle. If the speed is 300, then it'll play the whatever. So we'll say get speed. And then I'm going to drag this Liger blend space in here. Okay. And then I just have to connect them. Right? Speed into this into this. It'll override that. And that means I can delete these two now. And when I hit compile, we'll see some of those little red X's disappear. There we go. Making progress. So each of these blocks are animation states, right? They're states that the animation is in. Like, is it playing the run? Is it playing the jump up? Is it playing a blend between the run and the idle? It's a state of what it is playing, right? Those little lines with the equal signs on them, those are transitions between those states, right? So how and when do we transition from one to the other? So what I usually do is I double click on this and I look at it and see what I can use, right? In this case, I could probably leave this one as it is, but I think that this is in air is referring to the other variable. So I'll just go ahead and delete that and drag my own is in air in here. So that is one way I could do it. Just to be safe, though, instead of doing it that way, I'm actually going to go back here and delete that entire transition. So just delete it, and then drag a new one. And then when I go in here, I can drag is in air, get is in air.
How do you drag the new transition? Not letting you do it. It's moving the idle run.
You drag from the little gray area on the side. Try that and see if that works.
And it's trying to play. I don't really know what it's doing right now. Want to play something?
So yeah, area around the drag. There. Okay. So again, drag from here up to jump start. Then I'll go into the transition. And if this is in the air, I want it to play that transition. So I'll get is in air and plug that in. And then again, compile, save. I think that fixed some stuff. So go back to default. So if we think about that, right? If our character is on the ground, it's going to play either the idle or the run, depending on depending on our speed. If our character is in the air, it's going to start by playing the jump start, right? As it plays the jump start, as it transitions into the jump start, the reason it's going to decide to start that transition is if the character is in the air, right? So now let's go to the jump start node. Double click on it. This one's a really easy one to fix. This is just saying play the jump start animation. I don't want to play the jump start animation. I want to play the Liger's jump up animation. So I'm just going to drag that in here, plug it in. I can delete that, compile, save. So cleared up a few more errors. So again, a lot of what I do is look at what is in here and see what I need to create and then just recreate these transitions. So double click in here. This one is probably the most complicated one to create. So to kind of think about this, what it's saying is what percentage of the previous animation is still left, right? So that is time remaining of the previous animation, a ratio of that, right? And right now it's 0.1. A tenth of that animation is still left to play, right? So when a tenth of that animation is left to play, when it's almost to the end of it, it will transition into the next animation, okay? So, only thing I really need from this is this node right here. So I'm just going to copy that, Control C, and then go back here, delete that entire. Oh, I want to look at this again. This is time remaining ratio. That's what we're looking for. So I'm going to go in here, delete that, create a new animation or a new transition, paste in that number. I can plug that in if I want to. And then I'm going to right click over here, and this is where I can search for new nodes to put in here. So I'm going to start typing time remaining, right? And it says time remaining ratio Liger jump up. And there we go. So now I just plug that into the top value. Now there's one more thing. Oh wait, no, not yet. This will work. So I'll hit compile and save, and it got rid of a lot of my errors there. Right? So go back to default. Now this next one is pretty easy. Again, it's jump loop. So we just want to play our jump loop. I'm going to drag my Liger jump loop in here, plug it in. I can delete my old one, but I want you to notice something. This Liger jump loop is a loop. It's going to play in a continuous loop forever, right? So that means I need to have that checked on the details. If I select Liger jump loop, loop animation is turned on, right? But some of my other animations, the jump up and the jump down, I don't want those to loop forever. I want them to play once, right? And then as it's transitioning out of it, I want it to not play it anymore, right? So I'm going to go ahead and hit compile on this and save. You'll see I got rid of some more errors. But I'm going to go back to my jump start, and I'm going to change that to not loop. So I'm just going to uncheck loop.
Where?
If you select the play Liger jump up and just uncheck the loop animation off to the side here. Okay. Did you find it? There you go.
You
Start.
just do that for jump start and jump end, or are there any other ones?
Yeah, jump start and jump end. The only two I do. So this transition from jump loop end, if I double click on that, this is the one with the big knot. Is it in the air? No. We'll then transition into this next animation. So I'll select knot and hit Control C. Go back to my default, and I'll delete that. I'll do a new transition there. Paste in my knot. And then I'll drag in is in air. Again, this is a get. And so if it is not in air, then it can enter the transition. If I hit compile and save, okay, we're doing a lot better. 2 more to go. Jump end, play third person jump. Oh, didn't mean to do that. So I'll play jump up, drag that, delete that. And I want to make sure that this one is not looping. Compile, save. So we just got a few more errors to go, and this last one should fix it. So again, this transition back from this into our idle on our run. If I double click on that, it's that time remaining ratio thing again, right? So I'll select that value, Control C, and then I'll delete that transition, drag the transition back, Control V, and then I have to get that time remaining ratio again. So right click, time remaining ratio. And so now I can put return value into the top and the out into can enter transition, compile, save. All of my errors are gone. Look at that.
Can you show me can you go back to the, your idle run?
Mhm.
The jump
Oh,
Idle run to jumpstart.
is in air.
Idle run to jumpstart. It's just is in air.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and then get is in air and connect to that, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think that's the thing that's going on.
Okay. So all your errors are gone. You'd think I'd be able to hit play and play my character now. And some of you have already tried it. It's still this dude. But look, now he's broken. So at least we did that.
Well, at least he's broken.
At least he's broken. Okay, so let's go ahead and fix the last thing in here to make this work. So the last thing I got to do is under this third person BP, under blueprints, there's this third person character. Right? This is actually why he's broken. If we go in there and go over to viewport, you'll see that the character it's referring to under mesh inherited is this guy. Right? Instead, I'm going to choose my Liger. Now he's pretty big. So in here, I'm going to go ahead and scale him down. Let's try 0.6. I want him to still be pretty big on all of these. There we go. Maybe even 0.7. There we go. I like that. Now, as it is right now, I could save this and I could play him, but it wouldn't play my animations. He would just be running around in his T or in his A pose, right? And that's because under animations right here, it's saying use animation blueprint, but then it says none, right? And that's because we haven't told it which one to use because we didn't have it until just now, right? We wanted to use that one we just created, which is Liger Anim Blueprint. So if I click that, look at that, now he's, yeah. So, compile, save. Y'all ready? There he is, look at him. You can see him. Play, watch him go. Liger. I'm a liger, do 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 do, and I jump. Yeah. Huh?
It sounds like an intro to an 80s cartoon.
Oh, what was? That's my other career. All right, so we're getting close. We're almost there. So the last thing is we made that attack animation. How do I make him punch something? All right. Right now, how I want it to work is I want to be able to click my mouse and he punches, but that's not working. Dude, what's up with his hair too? Look at that. It's getting like motion blur hair.
Turn motion blur off in your settings.
Project size.
Yeah, probably.
It's kind of cool though. It's like he's got like flame.
I'm also going to have to turn that hair to two-sided, I think.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay.
If you change the hair to two-sided, that'll probably actually just fix it.
Yeah, that's what I figured. That's for a later time. I'll worry about that later. So so we got our character here. We need to add that punch to it, though, right? We have the punch animation. What I want to happen is I want to be able to click, and it plays that punch animation. Now, you may remember where we saw some of our locomotion stuff or our movement stuff was in this third-person character under third-person BP, blueprints, third-person character. And you'll remember all this. This is my gamepad input and my movement input. Well, that's all this is doing right now. If you look, it's like input axis, which is like your joystick axis on your controller. If you do that, then it changes things, right? Here's mouse input, right? Well, what I'm going to do is I'm going to add another input. I'm going to add mouse click. So I click on this, and I'm going to say mouse. I think I need to do left mouse. Is that right? Left left mouse button. So I'm going to go ahead and click that, and so you'll get this left mouse button. So this is like an event. This is something that's going to happen. So whenever I press the left mouse button or release, I can make something happen. Right? So maybe I wanted it to like start shooting fire when I press a button, but stop when I release it. Right? So that's why it has both options. What do I want it to happen when I do that? Punch. Bless you. But bless you. But in this case, bless you again.
Our allergic to unreal.
In this case, to make the character punch, we just need to play that punch animation, right? So when I press the left mouse button, I want it to play an animation. Right? So I'm just going to start typing play anim. Right? And so we get this play anim montage or play animation mesh. I'm going to do play animation mesh because I just needed to play that one animation. Right? So let's click that. And then I can drag pressed to this button right here. And if I hit compile and save, there we go. Now when I play, you'll see he's moving around, right? And I run around. And whenever I click the mouse button, nothing happened. Oh, the reason nothing happened is because I didn't tell it which animation to play, did I? So which animation do I want it to play? This new animation to play, select asset, and I want it to play Liger attack. I'll save, try it again. Sorry, let me read this real quick.
It worked, but now all my other animations are broken.
So he's idling, he moves, and then when I punch, he punches. But now the run doesn't work anymore.
That isn't even idling.
Neither is the idle. None of the animations work anymore. By triggering that one animation, I broke all the others.
Use the animations to kill the animations.
It's like, so let's look at that. If I go to this third-person character, right? Generally, we're playing from that animation blueprint. That's how it decides which animation to play, right? But then I click the left mouse button, and it plays Liger attack. But then I never tell it to go back and start playing from that blueprint again, right? So it's just playing that one animation and then sitting there being like, now what? And I'm not telling it anything. So I got to tell it something. So I'm going to say set animation mode. Yeah, right there. Set animation mode. And I'm going to change that to blueprint. Use animation blueprint. It's already set up there, right? So I can just plug in this one to here, and you'd think that would fix it. Save. Y'all are starting to see a trend here, right? So there we go, right? And then when I'm ready to punch, I click the punch button, and now it's not playing my punch at all. It's just sort of snapping back to the beginning of my idle again. Right? Because I'm playing that animation, but then immediately setting it back to the blueprint. Right? I have to say, play that animation, and then set it back to the blueprint after that animation is finished playing. So, there's a couple of ways of doing that. The first is the one we'll probably go with because I can't remember one of the nodes I need for the other one. There's a way you can create a bind event to the end of that animation that basically says, once this animation is done playing, fire off this trigger. And then you can start playing the montage again after that trigger is fired. Instead, we'll kind of go with an easier option for this. We're just going to say, delay setting it back to the blueprint for the length of the animation. It's a little bit sloppy, but it'll still work. So to do that, we need to know how long my attack animation is. So if I go to Liger animation, Liger attack, it's right there, right? But instead of doing that, what I'm going to do is just mouse over it, and you'll see sequence length. It's like 5 lines down, right? 1.66667. That's the length of that animation. So that means I can delay that amount of time and then set it back to the sequence, and it will work. Now, why this is sloppy is because if you go change the length of that animation in Maya, you have to go set that delay to a different time too, right? So let's look here really quick at ways we can do this. I mean, there's other ways of doing this as well too. So 1.666, right? I will go to my blueprint, third person BP, right click, type in delay, right there. And I'll change that number to 1.666. Oh my goodness.
Is there a way of reading the duration of an animation as a float?
Do I know?
So like instead of manually typing in the duration, could you like
get the animation length?
Yeah, get the animation and then have it be a
Yes.
Yeah.
how?
Let me look at your notes. You can create a reference to it if you have it already on the object. Give me a minute and I'll let you know.
I think the thing to remember, there's like probably 30 different ways we can do this.
Scripting.
Scripting.
Yay!
So one of the ways that I think would probably work best is just to be able to bind something, bind it to the end of the animation. I can show you all how to do that. It's sort of my next step of like refining this a little bit better. Really, if you want the truth about it, there's a problem with this anyway in terms of gameplay, which is if you punch while your character is running forward, your character will slide while he's punching, right? Really what this should be is something that's happening on the on part of the skeleton, right? We could do a punch on the upper part of the character's body while the bottom part is still continuing to run or something like that. And that would be something we would do more in the state machine than in here. Really what I'm trying to get here is something that looks like the character is behaving correctly, so you can capture that and have a character playing in your demo reel, basically. So this will work to get that. Plug that into the delay, pull this out of completed into here. And so again, now it's got, we click the left mouse button, it plays our attack animation, it delays setting it back to the animation blueprint for 1.66 seconds. Compile, save. There we go. Punch. Now he's back at it again, right? So here's actually the problem, is if I punch while I'm doing that, it'll slide around, right? The trick is to not do that. Right? But again, that's why we're doing this for sort of demonstration purposes. There's much cleaner ways. And being able to do some very complex things in your animation blueprint is really a nice skill to have. So that's one of the reasons that this is like something we expand upon in character animation 2. If you take it, you can do a more advanced game set. So right now we have people who are doing stuff with root motion, and people who are doing stuff like multiple combo attacks that you can interrupt halfway through and get back to your idle and stuff like that. So, okay, so we got this. So the last thing I want to look at is a little bit of physics in here, right? And then we will be done. So I'm just going to drag over here in my stuff. They got these basics, right here, all these objects. So I'm just going to drag like a basic cube out here. Pull that up. I'm going to make it maybe a little thinner, a little taller. Right. Now, one of the cool things about this, if you just hold down Alt on this, you can drag that object and make duplicates of it. So I can do something like this, right? And I probably should have done something first before I did that though, which is I'm going to grab this object and scroll down here, and you see where it says simulate physics? I'm just going to check that on. Right. So then I can hold Alt can get multiple versions of this. So if I hit play, you'll see that if I punch, my character's hand is going to that object. However, if I walk forward, I can knock those objects down, right? So here's the thing. What's knocking those objects down is the capsule, not the character, right? That little pill shape is bumping into those and knocking it down. What I want to happen is I want the character's mesh to be able to knock that down, right? Or at least the physics asset that goes along with the character's skeleton. So really the character's hand joint should be able to knock that down when it hits it, right? But if I restart this, you'll see that that's not what's happening, right? If I tumble around here, he punches, it just goes through it, right? So there's a couple of things we can change on here, and this is actually there's so many different ways of doing this. I think that this, although may not be the most efficient in terms of calculations, like this may tax the machine a little bit more, is probably the easiest in terms of being a setup, which is I'm going to double click this third person character right here. I'm going to go to my viewport. I'm going to select Mesh Inherited. And I'm going to scroll down a little bit here, I think. Yes, here, to Collision, I think. Yes, Collision. I'm going to click this drop down on Character Mesh, and instead I'm going to do Custom. So it's you have to select Mesh Inherited right here, and then scroll down to here in the Collision tab, Collision Preset, set that to Custom. And then Collision Enabled right below that, set that to the bottom. Collision Enabled, Query, and Physics. Now if we hit Compile and Save, let's see if this will work now that Todd's watching. Look at that. He's punching stuff. Yay. So here's the cool part, right? Now we don't have to do too much more in Unreal again, right? We got this set up, which means that now you can play it and see what's going to look right for your animation. So example, I'm playing this, right? And I make my character run, like, he's a pretty big guy. Maybe I want him to run faster than that, right? Maybe I make him jump, right? And I'm like, maybe that's too high for a character this big to jump. So there's things I can start to change in here to figure out what that should look like. I can go in here to my blueprints, third person character, viewport, this character movement inherited. That's where I can change the character's run speed. Right now the max walk speed is 600. I could set that to 2000. That sounds like a nice round number. The character's jump Z velocity. How hard is the character pushing against the ground when they jump? Let's set that to 2000 as well, right? Compile, save, right? And you'll see that now this is going to affect how that little capsule works, right? So when he runs, he's going to run really fast, probably way too fast. And when he jumps, he's going to jump really high, right? This is something for you to balance, because that information will tell you how to make your animation. And the animation side of this is something you kind of already understand. When we're changing this, let's say we change the way we want that run to look, and we make it run a little faster. Well, when I look at my run in there, I'm like, wow, his feet are sliding everywhere. Maybe I need to change the way he runs inside of Maya. I make those changes, and this is where this becomes super powerful for you, or super beneficial to have done this. Right, let me save all really quick. I go in here in Maya. Let me fix the folders. For some reason that didn't stay. Choose, and then Liger underscore. So let's, there we go, Liger underscore. So let's just make a change to the attack for an example, right? Right now in the attack, he does that, right? Let's say instead, I want to angle his head up. So he's looking forward more. Maybe the chest too. I don't know what that's not the chest. I'm really wanting to get into this, right? Get into that punch. Maybe a little bit more of a twist on there. And I'm really going to push him into it as well. Maybe push him forward. Get this foot to also step forward, right? Change my knee. So I've made several changes to my animation, right? And I know the concern. I made them all on the wrong keyframe too. Look at that. Oh man, really? So I know your concern is probably, do I have to go through all that again to make this attack work? And the answer is no. I just have to export that animation again and re-import it, right? If I bring over my game editor or game exporter, I can uncheck all of those except for attack. I can export that. No. I gotta make sure I have my object set. Ah, man, really? I gotta try to remember which ones I selected. I don't remember if it was this one. Well, let's look real quick and see.
To answer your question, no. Yep.
Sorry.
For some reason, Unreal doesn't like referencing animations in blueprints.
Liger Rig GR. That was my top one.
You can do it in the animation blueprint, but not in the character. But probably the easiest way of doing it would be to add a punch state to the animation state of the shape.
Global GR.
But I don't want it.
Well, that's why you're in animation, and not in whatever the hell I'm doing.
Okay. So I can just, I had to set that back up again. I can just hit export on that attack, and it'll re-export the attack. And so now I can just go into Unreal, right click on that attack animation, that one right there, right? Right click and say re-import. So I recognize that what it looks like right now is this. Since I exported over the same file, right click, re-import, it'll bring it back in, and now it looks like this, right? So that means all you have to do now is the easy part, which is make the animations look really, really good, right? It's the easy part. But it's at least the part you wanted to do, right? I understand Unreal may not be necessarily the stuff you wanted to do. But you have all of this functional now. And to test it, you just make some changes to the animation, export them out, and see if it's working better. So all you have to do now is make these like kind of short animations and update what is in there now. So that's what I'm going to be doing over the next few days. I'm going to be going through, changing those animations, sort of showing you how to focus in on those animations, like what makes a run distinctive, what makes a run interesting. The attack is a fun animation to do because it really has to have a lot of direction in it to have that energy. And so we're going to create all of those animations, re-import them into here, and reapply them to this character. And we'll just slowly start seeing our game or our character come together and start to look better and better and better. This is the animation process because what we just did is prototyped, right? I am literally working on a project right now where they have an animation, but they don't know exactly how it should function in game, right? So rather than ask me to animate for 2 days for something they may throw away, I made something in about 20 minutes, and I sent it to them and they're going to try to get that functional, and then from there, I will have enough information on how to make the animation complete, right? It's a lot of studios. I worked with Gearbox for a while. Gearbox has different phases of that they actually have names for it, right? There's a blocking pass, there's a blocking plus, there's a, like, I can't remember what their names are for them. But eventually, it just keeps getting better and better and better. And in sort of game studio way of looking at it, you polish it until it's quote unquote shippable, right? That if it has to go out the door like that, it's okay. You're not going to like be embarrassed that that's what you animated, right? If you get everything to shippable, you come back and you polish it, and you spend as much time on making it polished as possible. I've never been in a game that had as much polish time as we wanted. And yeah, it doesn't mean it doesn't happen, right? Like you get polish time in most productions if they're managed correctly. But really, you're just making this better and better and better until you run out of time, right? Questions?
I have a question for after.
Okay. So here's the takeaway. Next class period, we have homework due. Yeah. So what we're going to do is break up into our groups, and we're going to play each other's game. So if you're doing this in 2D, that means you got a little bit of research to do. I can help you with some of it, particularly if it's in Construct. I haven't used Paper 2D, but if we want to open up the 2D Unreal file, it's very similar to the 3D side, or to the 3D side scroller, right? The only difference is you're not bringing in skeletal meshes, you're bringing in sprites. That's the part I haven't done, right? And I'm sure that there's tutorials on it. So what we've looked at today may be helpful if you're deciding to go that way. If you're wanting to do it in Construct, that's fine too. If you're wanting to do it in some other game engine that you're more familiar with, that's cool. I know Unity does 2D pretty well. Whatever it is though, to get credit for the homework, you have to have something playable, right? It doesn't mean it has to be good. In fact, I would hope your animations are still bad, because that means you were focusing on the right things and getting something playable. That way you can polish that playthrough. Yeah.
My punch animation isn't doing the physics thing properly.
Okay. Actually, let me kind of do that as a one-on-one. Any other last-minute questions?
Can people not in your class ask questions?
Yeah.
When you say that you've never worked on a project that had the desired amount of polish time, does that include your work for Civilization? How shortened?
Oh, I don't know. It wasn't major. Like, we had hoped that we would have like, we'd hoped that we'd had like 3 months of polish time, and maybe we got 1.5 months or something like that. So yeah, it shortened it. You always kind of see that coming, and that's why shippable should literally be something that you're not embarrassed by. And you kind of recognize that, and sometimes you're like, oh, this animation is going to be really good. I'll spend a little bit of extra time while I'm working on it, just to make sure that's the one that's like the showcase piece. You also start to recognize that that's not always a bad thing. That not having enough time means that you have to prioritize. And if you have an animation that is, like, let's say you have an animation that only plays every now and then, and people don't see it that often, then maybe that one should not be the one that gets the most amount of polish. Maybe the ones that people see all the time should get the most amount of polish. So, does that make sense? But yeah, a lot of it is, one of the things that happen, and it's just something you kind of have to watch out for in game design, they call it feature creep, right? It's that you have this list of stuff you want to get done, and somebody says, oh, you know what would be really cool? Is if we did this thing that requires you to do 500 more animations, right? Like, and you say, no, let's not do that. And they say, yeah, let's do it. And then they do it. And then, and then you have a bunch more animations to do. And it happens in all areas, right? Let's do this thing that requires new custom environment objects. So let's do this thing. And it maybe probably makes parts of the game better, But you got to be careful that you're not just doing it to be adding stuff because you're already familiar with what's in it. It should be making the game better. So, somebody else have a question?
I mean, I guess I was sort of curious too, sort of more just like an industry question, but it's like, how has that also changed? It's like if you have I guess most console games now too, it's like we'll still get like DLC, or it's like updates and that kind of thing, but it's like, for games that were just like, you just have to be done with it, like, I don't know.
You have to live with that bug for the rest of your life. I will say DLC almost never includes art. Well, I want to say that. Very rarely includes art updates unless it's like new art packs, right? A DLC is rarely going to be like, we went in and polished that animation a little bit more, right? It would be more like, we added an additional character, we added an additional level you could play that had some new animations in it. A lot of time, especially like the patches, those are almost always programming bug fixes. And that's something you'll hear a lot of discussion about that, the idea that some studios would, which I've never worked for one of them, would ship something that was unfinished with a day zero patch, meaning they really were just buying more time. Their due date came, and they said, okay, here's our game, knowing they were turning over a buggy game, and then they would spend a couple of weeks or months fixing those errors in a patch, and then as soon as you buy a game, brand new on day one, you have to still patch the game that you just bought. So like, you bought a broken game that they gave you a Band-Aid for. And that was like, that's something that it will happen. Like, you will ship something, and then somebody will discover a bug, and you have to make changes to it. But to not postpone a game or something that is really buggy, like, it has some issues, and I think a lot of people have started to recognize that, and hopefully they don't do it as much anymore. But I don't know. I'm not for sure. And then there's also the alternative of just saying it's infinitely in beta.
Just feeling it out still.
Yeah, it's always. Other questions, comments, things? All right, I'm going to save the video and upload that to YouTube. And rest of the time is yours. I don't know how much time that is. It looks like we got about 45 minutes or something like that. So you can be working on it. So, cool.
Mention animation.
Yep. Give me 1 second here to